So today the government is expected to announce a downgrading of its plans for HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail.
Yes, changes to plans for modernising the rail network reportedly will include axing the eastern leg of HS2. They've provoked accusations that the north of England has been betrayed. Well, joining us now, the Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State for Justice, Dominic Raab. Mr Raab, thanks very much for joining us. Good to see you this morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good. Unfortunately, there were plenty of people up north, so to speak, who are not feeling very good this morning. Prime Minister promised that this was all part of the boost for the north, and now it doesn't look like it's going ahead.
Well, I think they can feel very energised by an unprecedented investment in national infrastructure, with a £96 billion investment in the links nationally, but also regionally into the Midlands and the North. There is obviously a huge investment going into HS2, but there's also a focus on connecting the towns and the cities of the Midlands and the North, because we know the economic value for the small and medium-sized businesses up there is huge. There's also a focus on the passengers, the commuters, and, for example, with integrated fares for passengers when they take a rail fare or rail journey that links in with a bus or a tram, making sure that the offer is integrated and there's a cap on fares. So on everything from the major infrastructure through to the consumer, this is an unprecedented investment, and I think the full details will, of course, be laid out in the House of Commons later on today, but it is part of the Levelling Up agenda. It is part of us delivering on that, and of course it will benefit the whole country to have a more balanced economic engine.
Unfortunately, those in the north who represent constituents up there don't agree. Tracy Brabin is one of the mayors who's affected, and this is what she had to say to us this morning.
Every year that HS2 is not built in Leeds, we lose £1.7 billion worth of investment. We have the land on the South Bank ready and waiting. How long are we going to wait for that 21st century network that we've been promised? Another broken promise from the Prime Minister, and certainly the people of Yorkshire will be angry about this.
Talking to our Charlotte Hawkins a little bit earlier, it's another broken promise.
Well, no, I don't accept that, and it was a pretty partisan intervention by the Labour politician that you just interviewed. But what I would say is this: Yorkshire will benefit from the £96 billion investment. Of course, the more we invest, of course, the more there'll be demands to do X or Y. The full detail will be set out. So I think some of the criticism is premature, because we'll have the full panoply, the full range. But this investment will not just benefit the north-south connections, but also the Yorkshire north-western connections, the connections between East and West Midlands. That's critically important for the small businesses that want that regional interconnectivity between the towns of the region, between the cities of the region. I would also make the case that this is good for the whole country, because we're broadening the economic engine that's driving us forward. That means the tax revenue will be more broadly raised, as well as the economic opportunities. Things like development, housing development, that will not just be or predominantly focused on London and the South East. So this is win-win. It's good for the region. I think it will be good for all regions of the Midlands and the North.
But do you understand, though, Dominic, do you understand their frustration? Because what they were expecting was a brand new line that was going to increase those links significantly, speed up those links and really help those areas. And actually what it seems like they're going to get is just an upgrading of the line as it is at the minute, albeit as important as that may be. But that wasn't what they were sold. That wasn't what they were being told. And so, yet again, it feels like the people and the constituents in those areas are being shortchanged.
I don't think that's right, and I think we're wrong to get ahead of the detailed announcement that the Prime Minister and the Transport Secretary will make later today. What I would say is I don't think anyone can say, with a £96 billion investment in the Midlands and the North, that we're not following through, that we're not taking action. Of course, the public finances are a stretch because of the bounce back from this appalling pandemic, the hit it made on the economy and tax revenue. But £96 billion is unprecedented, and it is going into the Midlands, it is going into the North West, it's going into Yorkshire, it is linking up the North and the South, but is also critically dealing with that regional interconnectivity, which we've stressed, so important for the expansion of small and medium-sized businesses in the area. The full detail will be set out later, but this is a massive, massive commitment, vote of confidence in the Midlands and the North, but it's good for the whole country.
Let's talk about confidence, because, of course, it's been a torrid couple of weeks for the Prime Minister and your party. He admitted yesterday that he'd crashed the car when it came to the handling of the sleaze and the corruption allegations that he's been trying to deal with. There was a YouGov poll that was done recently that said 60% of those asked think the Conservatives give the impression of being very sleazy or disreputable. That's the worst score there has ever been since this question was asked originally back in 2006. There is a big problem with confidence in your party. You're just talking about the confidence that people in the North can have in what you're trying to do with the rail links, but there is a more important problem at the moment, isn't there? The fact is the majority of the country believe that your party is sleazy and disreputable.
Look, I don't accept that, but I do accept that we need to tackle it, which is why the government...
That's a poll that's been done. You know, that's the figures that they got. So whether you accept it or whether you choose to acknowledge that or not, there is a problem, isn't there?
I don't accept the way you presented it, but let me answer your question squarely. First of all, what people want to see is us focusing on their priorities. The investment in rail infrastructure is one illustration of that, but that is critically important. And it's absolutely right that whether it's the perception or the reality of it, we've got to deal with this. People have to have confidence in the political system. And the Prime Minister has been very clear. We made a mistake. We regret it in terms of conflating Owen Paterson and that individual case with the broader due process. And we're fixing it. Last night we introduced, and in the House of Commons, and the House of Commons passed a new resolution which will ban paid lobbying or consultancy by MPs in political terms.
But even that was watered down from what Labour wanted. They wanted to stop all second jobs totally and make it very clear you couldn't do that, but the Tories weren't happy with that, so they've watered it down.
Sorry, just for your viewers, you're factually pretty woefully incorrect on what you've just said. Our resolution strengthened what the Labour resolution said, because as well as a ban on political lobbying, which is absolutely right, we also introduced a second element, which was a limit, a common sense limit, on the amount of time people can spend or the amount of external interest that an MP can have, so that their overriding focus should be on their constituency business and serving their constituents. We've said that, of course, it's the House to decide these rules. We said that we passed the resolution calling for the Committee on Standards to work up, based on those two principles, the detailed regulation by January. Yeah. What the government and the Prime Minister introduced was stronger than what Labour had introduced in the House of Commons.
We're in a really weird position here.
Sorry,
because
you're
saying...
Susanna,
No, sorry. You've just said
it
bans political lobbying. Political lobbying was already banned under the previous rules. That's what Owen Paterson fell foul of. What you did 2 weeks ago was you tried to water down the standards that MPs were held to. And you've just admitted that was a massive mistake. And now you're doing this huge U-turn. We had one of our experts in the studio earlier who said he was in PMQs yesterday. The support ebbing away amongst your own backbenchers because you forced backbench Tory MPs to vote 2 weeks ago to water down standards. Now you're introducing rules, which you claim are new, but lobbying has always been banned under the rules, or definitely recently it's been banned under the rules. And now you're trying to say we're toughening them up. The backbenchers are furious with the Prime Minister because he keeps switching on this.
Sorry, Susanna, I'm listening very carefully and hopefully I'll get the chance to reply. Political lobbying has been banned, yes. But the question of whether you can have a job as a consultant in parliamentary, the area of parliamentary business or political has not been banned.
That's right. But sorry, in the interview earlier, you said you were banning political lobbying. That has already been banned. Owen Paterson was suspended because of breaching that particular rule.
So the lobbying is banned, but consultancies have not been banned. That was introduced by the government last night. That was a common point of consensus with the Labour Party, but the government introduced a further element, which is a broader limit, a cap, if you like, on the amount of external interest that you can have as an MP, so that your overriding focus is on your constituents. And we called on, and the House of Commons called for the Committee on Standards to work up that detail regulation by January. Those are two important areas beyond paid advocacy or lobbying that are entirely new, and it's quite right that we fix this issue.
All right, Dominic Raab, good to talk to you this morning. Just one final question. What did you make of the Prime Minister's behaviour yesterday in PMQs? It feels like right now the standard of political debate seems to be deteriorating. Lindsay Hoyle, who is the Speaker of the House of Commons, had to intervene a number of times and seemed to have lost patience with the Prime Minister.
Well, look, I fully respect the right of the Speaker to regulate the proceedings of the House. I think what the Prime Minister was pointing out is that Keir Starmer has been talking about banning this, that and the other, but has not revealed the underlying client from the paid consultancy and legal work that he did, his second job. I think that's a legitimate question to ask. It's about the substance of this issue. I think, frankly, for Keir Starmer just to engage in an ad hominem attack, calling the Prime Minister a coward, is precisely the kind of personalised character attacks that we ought not to be engaged in. But I make no apology for asking the question of the leader of the Labour Party in terms of the tens of thousands of pounds that he earned in his second job. Well, who was actually benefiting from that? Who was he working for? That's a reasonable question. I think your viewers would expect it.
Are you making an allegation against the Labour leader?
No, we're asking the question. It's clear that money was earned. It's a reasonable question. It's exactly the kind of question that will be asked of us. Who in relation to the legal work he did for Michon de Rea, the law firm, or who in relation to the consultancy work he did, who was the underlying client?
Okay,
Is that not a reasonable question? It's not attack. There may be a good answer to it. I think people are asking those questions of us. I think it's reasonable to ask him to answer that.
OK, except there is a forum for doing that, and this was Prime Minister's questions. And I think the concern was that the Prime Minister has to be held accountable in Prime Minister's questions for what he does and what the government does, not deflect by turning questions on other people.
I think he's answered all of those questions. He was at the liaison committee which is the chairs of all the select committees of Parliament, answering questions. We engage in this. I expect to be asked these questions. I think it's only reasonable of Keir Starmer, who has engaged in second jobs himself, to answer those questions, not just as a matter of principle, but also because of the, frankly, rank double standards that we hear. We want to move on. Well, that's why we introduced the resolution yesterday, to fix the problem and to do so on a cross-party basis. But I think all MPs should expect those questions, including the leader of the Labour Party.
You say that, Dominic Raab, but Sir Keir Starmer did come back and say, we put forward a plan to clear up politics, to strengthen the standards in politics. And if you can believe it, after 2 weeks of Tory Sleaze and corruption, the Prime Minister whipped his MPs against the plan of action, and frankly, he just doesn't get it. And that's the reality, isn't it? At the minute, there's a battle going on. How confident are you, Dominic Raab, that you can gain back the public's trust, and as Susanna said, those backbenchers' trust in the leadership of the party?
Oh, I think overwhelmingly MPs support the action we took, and we're pleased that yesterday, in black and white, on the order paper, on top of the question of banning political consultancies for MPs, we went further and we said, actually, we ought to have an overall limit on the external interest. That's not something that MPs engage in. That's not something that the Labour Party put forward. So we were stronger in our proposals, but we welcome the fact.
It's a reasonable limit at the moment, isn't it? We don't know what that reasonable limit will be yet. That's still quite vague right now.
So, first of all, on the principle, we're delighted that on a cross-party basis that was supported. You're right to say that it set out the principles. It's now for the Committee on Standards to work up the detailed guidance and regulation, and that's right, because it's for the House the parliamentary authorities to decide that. But they've been given a very clear steer now from Parliament based on the two core principles that the government put forward yesterday. Look, this is the right thing to do. We want to do it on a cross-party basis. We want to clear this issue away so we can concentrate on the bread and butter issues that most voters want us to be focused on.
Yeah. Of course, if you hadn't tried to water down the standards, we wouldn't still be talking about these motions and sleaze. But for now, thanks very much indeed.
Sorry, Susanna. I know that GMB always likes to have the last word and fair cop. But we said in relation to this conflation of Owen Paterson with the issue of due process, which is absolutely right to look at, that was a mistake. What we did yesterday is fix the problem, and now we want to move forward.
OK. Dominic Raab, thank you very much.
We appreciate the extra time we've had with you as well. Thanks for joining us.
Good to talk to you.